The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Maya Richardson's corner office, casting long shadows across her polished mahogany desk. She stood with her back to the door, looking out at the city sprawled below her. From the 42nd floor, the people on the sidewalks looked like tiny dots moving in streams. 5 years ago, when she founded Pinnacle Properties, she never imagined she'd be here in this building overseeing more than 200 employees. Maya took a sip of her coffee and grimaced. Cold again. She'd been so lost in thought she'd forgotten to drink it. With a sigh, she set down the mug and turned back to her desk, where the quarterly report lay open. The numbers didn't lie. Something was wrong at Pinnacle. On paper, the company was growing. They'd opened 2 new branch offices in the past year alone. Revenue was up 15%. But the other metrics told a different story. Client complaints had doubled. Staff turnover had jumped from 7% to nearly 25% annually. The company culture surveys showed a steady decline in employee satisfaction. Maya ran her hand over her face, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. She'd built this company from nothing, pouring everything she had into it, her savings, her time, her heart. And now it felt like it was slipping through her fingers. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called. Straightening her posture and smoothing down her tailored navy suit, Andre Phillips, her chief operating officer and oldest friend, stepped into the office. One look at his face told Maya he hadn't slept well either. "You've seen the numbers," she said. It wasn't a question. Andre nodded, closing the door behind him. "It's not good. Sit down." Maya gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Tell me what you're thinking." Andre eased himself into the chair, his normally confident posture diminished by concern. "The branch managers are blaming the economy, but we both know that's not it. Real estate is booming right now. Then what?" Maya pressed. "I think—" Andre hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I think there might be issues with the company culture, things happening that we're not seeing from up here." Maya leaned back in her chair, considering his words. She'd built Pinnacle on a foundation of integrity, diversity, and exceptional client service. Had those values eroded over time? Had growth come at the cost of what made them special in the first place? "Give me specifics," she said. Andre pulled out his tablet and opened a document. "I've been tracking patterns in the complaints. The Denver office has had an unusual number of clients backing out of deals at the last minute. The Chicago team has high turnover, specifically among women and people of color. And the flagship office here in Atlanta, the sales numbers are great, but client satisfaction is at an all-time low." Maya stood up again, unable to sit still with this information swirling in her mind. She walked to the window again, her reflection faint against the bright sky beyond. "I've tried talking to the department heads," Andre continued, "but I get the same rehearsed responses. Everything's fine. It's just growing pains. We're handling it." "But they're not handling it," Maya said quietly. "No, they're not." Maya turned back to face her friend. "Something's happening in my company that no one wants to tell me about." Andre nodded slowly. "I think so too." A heavy silence fell between them. Maya's mind raced through possibilities. She could hire an outside consultant to evaluate the company culture. She could call an all-hands meeting and demand answers. She could personally interview every employee, but would any of that get her the truth? Would people speak freely to the CEO, especially if the problems involved management? The kernel of an idea began to form in Maya's mind. It was unusual, perhaps even a bit dramatic, but it might be the only way to see the unfiltered reality of what was happening at Pinnacle. "What if they didn't know they were talking to me?" she said suddenly, Andre's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "What if I went undercover? As a new hire, spent time in different departments, different branches, saw how things really operate when the boss isn't around?" Andre's eyes widened. "You want to go undercover in your own company? Like that TV show?" Maya shrugged. "Kind of, but with no cameras, no big reveal at the end, at least not right away. Just me, seeing the truth with my own eyes. That's—" Andre paused, thinking it through. "Actually, that might work. But how would you pull it off? People know what you look like." Maya gestured at her face and hair. A different hairstyle, some glasses, more casual clothes. "I've only visited the Denver and Chicago offices twice since they opened. Most of those employees wouldn't recognize me if I passed them on the street. And what about here in Atlanta? I'll start with the other offices. Give me a week to figure out the details. Maya's energy was building now, her mind already racing ahead to how she would make this work. Andre looked skeptical. Maya, you're the founder and CEO. You can't just disappear for days or weeks. There are meetings, decisions that need your input. We'll figure it out, Maya said firmly. I can work remotely for most things. Reschedule what can be rescheduled. You can cover for me with the board. And what name will you use? What backstory? Maya thought for a moment. I'll be Michelle Rivers, new to the city, with some real estate experience from another market, looking for a fresh start. This is crazy, Andre said, but there was a hint of admiration in his voice. But it might be exactly what we need. Maya walked back to her desk and sat down, suddenly energized. The quarterly executive retreat is next week. Everyone expects me to be out of the office anyway. I'll announce I'm extending my trip for personal time. That gives me at least 10 days. Andre shook his head, but he was smiling now. You know, most CEOs would just hire someone to fix this problem. I didn't build this company by letting other people solve my problems, Maya replied. Fair enough. So who knows about this plan? Just you, Maya said firmly. The fewer people who know, the better. What exactly are you hoping to find? Andre asked. Maya's expression grew serious again. The truth. Whatever it is. If there are people undermining our values, I need to know who and why. If our systems are failing, I need to see how. I can't fix what I don't understand. And if what you find is ugly, then I'll deal with it, Maya said with determination. Whatever it takes. Andre stood up, his full height imposing even across the large office. I'll help however I can. But please be careful. People might not react well if they find out the boss was spying on them. I'm not spying, Maya corrected him. I'm learning. There's a difference. After Andre left, Maya canceled her remaining meetings for the day. She needed time to think, to plan. This wasn't a decision to take lightly. She picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the number she was looking for. Jessica Wu had worked in theater before becoming a corporate consultant. She knew everything about transforming appearances and creating believable personas. 3 rings later, Jessica answered. Maya, it's been ages. How are you? I'm good, Jess. Listen, I need your help with something unusual. Can you come to my office tomorrow? It's confidential. Sounds intriguing. I'll be there at 9. Maya hung up and turned back to her computer. She pulled up the employee directories for each branch and began studying faces, names, team structures. She needed to understand exactly where to position herself to see the most. As the afternoon turned to evening, Maya remained at her desk, making notes, developing her plan. The cleaning staff came and went, nodding respectfully as they emptied her trash and vacuumed around her. Finally, as the clock neared midnight, Maya stood and gathered her things. Tomorrow would be the first step in a journey that might change everything about the company she'd built. In the quiet of her empty office, she made a promise to herself. No matter what she discovered, she would face it head-on. If Pinnacle had lost its way, she would find the path back. And if people within her company were working against everything she believed in, they would soon learn that underestimating Maya Richardson was the biggest mistake they could make. The security guard tipped his hat as she passed through the lobby. Working late again, Ms. Richardson? Just finishing up some important work, Charlie, she replied with a tired smile. Sometimes you have to look below the surface to find what's really going on. Ain't that the truth, he agreed, holding the door for her. As Maya stepped out into the night air, she took a deep breath. For better or worse, she was about to see her life's work through entirely new eyes. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. She was ready for the truth, whatever it might be. Jessica Wu's loft apartment doubled as her consulting studio, with one half set up like a stylist's workspace complete with a makeup station, clothing racks, and a full-length mirror. Maya sat in a high-backed chair, watching as Jessica circled her with narrowed eyes. So let me get this straight, Jessica said, tapping a makeup brush against her palm. You want me to make you unrecognizable to people who see you almost every day? Not everyone sees me every day, Maya clarified. I'll start at the branch offices where they mostly know me from company photos and video calls. Denver first, then Chicago. Jessica nodded, studying Maya's face from different angles. We can work with that. You've got a distinctive look, polished, powerful. We'll go the opposite direction. For the next 2 hours, Jessica worked her magic. She applied a base makeup slightly darker than Maya's natural tone, subtly changing her skin's undertones. She added a beauty mark near Maya's mouth. Next came the hair. Jessica produced a wig that matched Maya's natural hair color but in a completely different style. Shorter, with loose curls instead of Maya's usual sleek, straightened look. Glasses, Jessica announced, producing several pairs. Nothing with a strong prescription, just enough to slightly distort your eyes to anyone looking closely. Maya tried on 3 pairs before settling on tortoiseshell, frames that softened her face and changed its proportions. Now for the body language, Jessica said, stepping back to assess her work so far. You carry yourself like a CEO. Straight back, chin up, direct eye contact. Michelle Rivers needs to be more hesitant, less certain. Maya nodded, immediately adjusting her posture, slumping slightly, making herself smaller. Good. But don't overdo it, Jessica cautioned. She's not incompetent, just less confident than Maya Richardson. They spent another hour on voice modulation and movement patterns. Maya practiced speaking in a slightly higher pitch with less assertive phrasing. By the time they moved on to clothing, Maya was beginning to feel like she was preparing for a role in a play. No designer labels, Jessica said firmly, pulling items from a rack she'd prepared. Nothing tailored. Off-the-rack business casual. The kind of clothes someone would wear if they were trying to look professional on a limited budget. Maya eyed the bland pencil skirt and loose-fitting blouse with distaste. Is this really necessary? Absolutely, Jessica insisted. Clothes are the first thing people notice. Your usual wardrobe probably costs more than what some of your employees make in a month. The comment stung, but Maya knew it was true. When she finally stood before the mirror in her complete Michelle Rivers disguise, she barely recognized herself. What do you think? Jessica asked. Maya turned from side to side, taking in the transformation. It's perfect, actually. I look like a completely different person. Not completely different, Jessica corrected. Just different enough. Remember, the best disguises don't try to make you into someone else entirely. They just redirect attention away from your identifying features. 3 days later, Michelle Rivers walked through the doors of Pinnacle Properties' Denver office with a nervous smile and a folder containing her transfer paperwork. Andre had handled the details, creating a paper trail showing Michelle as a new hire being transferred from a small affiliate office that had recently closed. The receptionist barely glanced at her. New hire orientation is down the hall, room 204. Maya muttered a quiet thank you and headed in the direction indicated, careful to walk with Michelle's slightly uncertain gait rather than her usual confident stride. The orientation room held 5 other new employees, 2 men and 3 women, all looking varying degrees of nervous and excited. A bored-looking HR representative named Tina was handing out packets. Sign the forms on pages 3 through 7, she said without making eye contact. Benefits info is in the back. Questions? One of the new hires, a young woman with braided hair, raised her hand. The health insurance options are a bit confusing. Could you explain? It's all in the packet, Tina cut her off. Read it carefully. If you still have questions, email HR. Maya felt a flicker of disappointment. This wasn't how Pinnacle's onboarding process was supposed to work. The company handbook specifically outlined a thorough, welcoming orientation program. After completing the paperwork, the new hires were led on a perfunctory tour of the office. Maya noted how Tina introduced them to department heads but skipped most regular staff members. Several times she heard employees making snide remarks about new blood, just loud enough to be overheard. By lunchtime, Maya's stomach was in knots. The friendly, supportive culture she'd worked so hard to build seemed non-existent here. When the new hires were finally released to their assigned departments, Maya headed to the sales floor where she'd be working for the next 3 days. The sales manager, Brian Kelly, was a tall man with an artificial smile that never reached his eyes. Maya recognized him from quarterly meetings, though they'd never spoken at length. Michelle Rivers, he read from her file. Some experience, but nothing spectacular. Well, we'll see if you've got what it takes to succeed at Pinnacle. His tone suggested he doubted it. He led her to a small desk in the corner of the sales floor and handed her a list of leads. Cold calls until you prove yourself. The good territories go to people who deliver results. Maya nodded meekly, settling into the uncomfortable chair. Around her, the sales floor buzzed with activity. She put on the headset provided and began working through the call list, keeping one ear tuned to the conversations around her. What she heard over the next few hours made her blood run cold. Just tell them the property appraised higher than it did. They'll never check. Those fair housing rules are just guidelines, not laws. No one enforces that stuff. The boss lady in Atlanta is too busy with her diversity initiatives to notice what really makes money around here. The last comment, from a senior sales rep named Victor, was met with knowing laughter from those nearby. Maya gripped her pen so tightly it nearly snapped, forcing herself to maintain her cover. During a bathroom break, she overheard two female employees talking. "I submitted that complaint 3 times," one said quietly. "HR keeps losing it. Just drop it," the other advised. Diane filed a discrimination claim last year and suddenly all her commissions were questioned. She was gone a month later. But it's not right. Welcome to Pinnacle. The glossy brochures talk about values and integrity, but that's just for show. Maya leaned against the bathroom stall, feeling physically ill. This couldn't be happening in her company. Not the company she'd built from nothing, pouring all her values and principles into its foundation. By the end of her first day, Maya was exhausted from maintaining her disguise and heartsick at what she'd witnessed. In her hotel room, she called Andre on a secure line. "It's worse than we thought," she said without preamble. "The Denver office is completely toxic. The managers are encouraging staff to skirt regulations. HR is burying complaints and they're openly mocking our company values." Andre's sigh was heavy with disappointment. "Any idea how long it's been this way?" "Long enough for it to become the office culture," Maya replied. "And Brian Kelly has been in charge for nearly 2 years. What's your next move?" Maya closed her eyes, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. "I need to see if it's isolated to this office or if it's company-wide. Tomorrow I'll try to get closer to some of the senior staff, see what else I can learn." After hanging up, Maya sat on the edge of the hotel bed, staring at her transformed reflection in the mirror opposite. The woman who looked back at her seemed lost, uncertain. For the first time since founding Pinnacle, Maya wondered if she'd lost control of her own company. She reached for the notebook where she'd been jotting observations throughout the day, flipping to a clean page. At the top, she wrote, "Questions to answer." Below it, she began listing everything she needed to uncover before her undercover mission was complete. Who knew about these problems? How far up did they go? Was her executive team aware? Were they complicit? And most importantly, how could she fix what had been broken? Tomorrow would bring more answers, though she was beginning to fear what those answers might reveal. Maya Richardson had never backed down from a challenge, but this might be the greatest test she'd ever faced, saving her company from the rot growing within. She stared at her disguised reflection once more. "We're just getting started," she whispered to herself. Michelle's uncertain expression hardening into Maya's determination for just a moment before she carefully composed her features again. She had 2 more days in Denver, and then Chicago would be next. The truth was waiting to be uncovered, no matter how painful it might be. The Chicago office of Pinnacle Properties occupied 3 floors of a gleaming downtown high-rise. Maya, still disguised as Michelle Rivers, stood in the elevator, watching the numbers climb. Her 3 days in Denver had left her with a gnawing dread in the pit of her stomach. She'd hoped Chicago would be different. She needed it to be different. The elevator doors slid open on the 32nd floor, revealing a reception area nearly identical to the one in Denver. Same color scheme, same furniture, same Pinnacle logo displayed prominently on the wall. Maya had personally overseen the design of all branch offices, wanting them to feel connected, part of the same whole. The irony wasn't lost on her. Michelle Rivers, a woman with a clipboard, approached. "I'm Penny from HR. We're expecting you." Unlike the cold reception in Denver, Penny seemed genuinely welcoming, giving Maya a momentary spark of hope. Maybe the problems were isolated to one office after all. That hope lasted exactly 47 minutes, the time it took for Maya to complete her paperwork and be escorted to the sales department where she would again pose as a newly transferred employee. The sales director, Thomas Wilson, barely looked up from his computer when Penny introduced her. "Another transfer? Put her with Greg's team. They're down a person." Penny gave Maya an apologetic smile and led her to a cluster of desks where 3 people sat, all focused intently on their screens or phones. "This is Michelle," Penny announced. "She's joining your team." One man, presumably Greg, glanced up briefly. Great, there's an empty desk. Password for the computer is on a sticky note underneath. And that was it. No welcome, no introduction to the team, no explanation of current projects. Maya settled into the empty desk, logged into the computer, and began to quietly observe. The Chicago office operated differently than Denver on the surface. Where Denver had been openly hostile, Chicago was coldly efficient. Nobody made inappropriate jokes or openly discussed bending rules. Instead, there was a mechanical focus on numbers, targets, and beating out other teams. By lunchtime, Maya had figured out the office dynamics. Teams competed against each other ruthlessly, with the lowest performing group each month losing their bonuses. The pressure created an atmosphere where nobody helped colleagues. Information was hoarded as currency, and shortcuts were not just common but necessary for survival. "You're new, so let me give you some advice," a woman named Danielle whispered to Maya in the break room. "Don't waste time on the small clients. They count the same toward your quota as the big ones but take twice the work. Let them go to Wilson Realty down the street." "But don't our smaller clients deserve the same service?" Maya asked, genuinely curious how her employees justified this. Danielle laughed. "Sure, in a perfect world. But this isn't about service, it's about numbers. End of the month. Nobody asks how happy your clients were. Just how many deals you closed." Maya nodded as if taking this advice to heart, while mentally adding another item to her growing list of problems. After lunch, she was invited to sit in on a team meeting. Greg, their team leader, pulled up a spreadsheet on the conference room screen. "We're still behind Team Blue by 2 deals, he said grimly. "Ideas? What about the Rodriguez property?" someone suggested. "If we drop the price," "Already tried," Greg cut in. "They won't budge." "The inspection on the lakefront condo turned up black mold," another team member said. "But if we don't mention it, too risky," Greg shook his head. "Last thing we need is a lawsuit." Maya felt momentarily relieved that at least some ethical lines weren't being crossed until Greg continued. "What about that foreclosure on Oak Street? The one with the structural issues?" A team member named Paul perked up. "The inspection report is pretty technical. Most people wouldn't understand what they're reading." Greg nodded slowly. "If we emphasize the location and don't volunteer information about the foundation..." Maya felt sick as the team began strategizing how to offload a dangerously unsafe property onto unsuspecting buyers. This wasn't just cutting corners. It was deliberately putting people at risk. The day continued with more of the same. Maya documented everything discreetly, sending encrypted notes to Andre when she could do so without being observed. By the end of day 1 in Chicago, her initial assessment was clear. Denver's problems were overt, Chicago's were covert, but both offices had strayed far from Pinnacle's founding principles. On her second day, Maya was given more responsibility, including access to the team's client files. What she found shocked her even more than the previous day's revelations. Client complaints were systematically buried. Negative reviews were countered with fake positive ones posted by employees using multiple accounts. Worst of all, there was a folder labeled Executive Concerns that contained emails from Maya herself, inquiring about specific issues, emails that had been intercepted and never reached their intended recipients. During a department-wide meeting that afternoon, Maya witnessed something that made everything else pale in comparison. The regional director, Howard Parker, gave a presentation on the company's quarterly goals. "Atlanta wants us to focus on these diversity initiatives," he said, displaying a slide from Maya's own recent company-wide presentation. His tone made it clear what he thought of these initiatives. "But we all know what really matters," he continued, clicking to the next slide, which showed only revenue numbers. "Hit these targets and nobody will care how you did it or who you sold to." The room filled with knowing laughter. Maya sat perfectly still, Michelle's meek persona hiding the fury building inside her. After the meeting, she overheard Howard talking to Thomas Wilson in the hallway. "How much longer do you think we'll have to put up with Richardson's feel-good crusades?" Howard asked. "The board meeting next quarter should take care of that," Thomas replied with confidence. "Chen and Rodriguez are on our side now. We've got the votes to force her to step down." "About time," Howard agreed. "A company this size needs stronger leadership." The diversity experiment was interesting, but Pinnacle needs someone who understands how the real estate game is really played. Maya stood frozen by the water cooler, pretending to fill her cup while her mind raced. Chen and Rodriguez were board members, her board members. They'd been supportive of her vision from day one. Had they turned against her? Or were Howard and Thomas bluffing? She needed to know more. That evening, Maya called Andre from her hotel room, her voice tight with controlled anger. "They're planning to force me out at the next board meeting," she said without preamble. "What? Who is?" "Howard Parker and Thomas Wilson for sure, and they claim to have Chen and Rodriguez from the board on their side." Andre was silent for a moment. "That doesn't make sense. Chen called me just last week to praise your new community investment initiative. Either they're lying or they're planning to flip Chen and Rodriguez somehow," Maya said. "But that's not even the worst part. The Chicago office is systematically burying client complaints, intercepting my emails, and knowingly selling unsafe properties." "Jesus," Andre breathed. "And Denver? Different problem, same root cause. The company culture is rotten, Andre, and it goes all the way up to the regional directors. What about Atlanta? Should I start looking into things here?" Maya closed her eyes, feeling a headache building behind her temples. "Yes, but carefully. If the regional directors are involved, they might have allies in the home office too." "What's your next move?" Maya thought for a long moment. "I need to see it all firsthand. I'm coming back to Atlanta tomorrow night. Have Jessica meet me at my place to refresh this disguise. Day after tomorrow, Michelle Rivers is transferring to the home office." "That's risky," Andre warned. "Too many people know you there." "I'll stay out of the executive floor," Maya promised. "I need to know how deep this goes, Andre. I need to know who I can trust." After hanging up, Maya stood at the hotel window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. Lights twinkled in the darkness, beautiful from a distance. But she now knew what lay behind those gleaming facades. 5 years of her life. Every penny she had. Countless sleepless nights and sacrificed weekends, all poured into building Pinnacle properties. And somewhere along the way, when she wasn't looking closely enough, it had transformed into something she didn't recognize. Maya touched her reflection in the window glass, seeing past the disguise to her true self. The question wasn't just how to fix Pinnacle anymore. The question was whether Pinnacle, as it currently existed, was worth saving at all. Tomorrow she would return to Atlanta, to the heart of the company she had built. And there, she would make her final assessment. Whatever she found would determine not just the future of Pinnacle Properties, but her own legacy as well. The Atlanta headquarters of Pinnacle Properties stood like a monument to Maya's success. 30 floors of prime commercial real estate in the heart of the city. She'd personally overseen every detail of its design, from the sustainable materials to the open floor plan meant to encourage collaboration. Now, as she approached the building dressed as Michelle Rivers, it felt like walking toward a stranger's home. "Remember," Andre had warned her that morning, "most of the staff here have seen you in person. Stay on the lower floors, avoid the executive level entirely, and if anyone looks at you too closely, just move on." Maya had nodded. The weight of Jessica's latest disguise adjustments, slightly darker makeup, more pronounced glasses, and a shoulder-length wig with bangs, feeling strange against her skin. But the real disguise was in how she carried herself. Shoulders slightly hunched, eyes averted, steps hesitant. The opposite of CEO Maya Richardson in every way. She'd spent the previous evening with Andre, reviewing what she'd learned in Denver and Chicago. The picture wasn't pretty. Regional directors were deliberately undermining company values. Sales teams were encouraged to prioritize numbers over ethics. HR was burying complaints, particularly those related to discrimination. And somewhere in the mix, board members were being courted to support a coup against her. "What exactly are you hoping to find here?" Andre had asked. "Confirmation," Maya had replied. "I need to know if headquarters is infected too, or if the problems are limited to the branches." Now, as she stepped through the revolving doors into the lobby, Maya felt like a spy in enemy territory. The security guard barely glanced at her temporary ID badge, created by Andre with the company's own equipment. First hurdle cleared. According to her cover story, Michelle Rivers was transferring to the marketing department after stints in Denver and Chicago. Andre had arranged everything, working with a trusted assistant who believed Michelle was part of a routine staff rotation program. The marketing department occupied the 8th floor, far enough from the executive offices on the 30th to minimize risk of discovery. Maya settled at her assigned desk, introduced herself to a few nearby colleagues, and began the work of observation. The first few hours revealed subtle but important differences from the branch offices. Here, at the company's heart, the toxic culture was less obvious. People were professional, even friendly. There were no openly discriminatory comments, no blatant disregard for company policies. Yet something still felt off. Maya noticed how employees from different backgrounds tended to cluster separately. She saw how younger women's ideas were often overlooked in meetings until repeated by male colleagues. She observed the slight stiffening when executives from upper floors passed through. These weren't the flagrant issues she'd witnessed in Denver and Chicago, but rather the quiet undercurrents that could eventually grow into something worse if left unchecked. During lunch, Maya ventured to the company cafeteria, strategically choosing a table near a group of mid-level managers she didn't personally know. As they talked, unaware of her interest, she caught fragments of conversation. Third complaint this month. Told them to handle it quietly. Richardson would have a fit if she knew. Maya kept her head down, focusing on her salad while straining to hear more. The managers lowered their voices further, making it impossible to catch the full context. But one thing was clear. Information was being deliberately kept from her. After lunch, Maya decided to take a calculated risk. She needed to see the HR department where complaints were processed or buried. Based on what she'd learned at the branch offices, she took the elevator to the 12th floor, keeping her head down as employees entered and exited. The HR department was busy, with staff moving between cubicles and offices. Maya approached the reception desk with Michelle's meek smile. "I was hoping to update my contact information," she said softly. The receptionist pointed her to a row of computers along the wall. "You can do it yourself through the employee portal." "Perfect." Maya settled at a computer, logged in with Michelle's credentials, and began the process of updating her information. But her true attention was on the conversations happening around her. Two HR managers stood near the file room, their voices low but audible from Maya's position. "We need to reclassify those discrimination complaints," a woman in a gray suit was saying. "Legal thinks they could be problematic if they're all categorized together." The man she was speaking to nodded. "Spread them across different categories. Workplace environment, management concerns, that sort of thing." "Exactly. And put the Richardson-specific ones in the restricted access folder." Maya's fingers froze over the keyboard. "Richardson-specific complaints? What did that mean?" She finished her task quickly, then wandered toward the water cooler positioned near the file room door. As she filled a cup, she strained to see through the narrow window in the door. Inside, the woman in the gray suit was pulling files from a cabinet marked Executive Issues. Maya couldn't follow her in without raising suspicion. Instead, she lingered near the break room across the hall, nursing her water cup and watching. 15 minutes later, the woman emerged carrying fewer files than she had gone in with. Where had the others gone? Maya waited until the HR department began to empty for a late afternoon meeting, then slipped into the file room. The cabinet was locked, but the keys hung on a small hook just inside the door, an amateurish security measure that made Maya wince. With trembling fingers, she unlocked the cabinet and pulled open the drawer marked Executive Issues. Inside were dozens of folders, most labeled with executive names and dates. Maya quickly found the section marked Richardson M. and pulled the first file. What she read made her blood run cold. It wasn't just complaints about her leadership. These were documented instances where her directives had been deliberately misinterpreted or ignored, where her diversity initiatives had been implemented in ways designed to fail, where her questions about discrepancies had been met with carefully constructed explanations designed to mislead rather than inform. Maya was so absorbed in the files that she almost missed the sound of voices approaching. She quickly replaced the folder, locked the cabinet, and slipped out the back door of the file room just as someone entered from the front, her heart pounding. Maya made her way to the restroom and locked herself in a stall, needing a moment to process what she'd discovered. It wasn't just the regional directors working against her. The rot extended into the headquarters, into HR, possibly beyond. How deep did it go? Maya needed to know. She spent the rest of the afternoon moving carefully through different departments, listening more than speaking, watching interactions, noting which executives were mentioned with respect and which with eye rolls or knowing smirks. By 5 o'clock, she had a clearer picture, but the most damning evidence came as she was preparing to leave. Passing by a conference room on the 25th floor, where she'd ventured despite the risk, Maya heard familiar voices. The door was slightly ajar, and through the crack, she could see Howard Parker from Chicago and Richard Dawson, her own chief financial officer. "The board presentation is almost ready," Richard was saying. "Once they see these numbers compared to our competitors, they'll understand why Richardson's approach isn't sustainable." "Good," Howard replied. "And you've spoken to Chen?" "He's concerned about optics. Forcing out a black female CEO won't look good to the press." Howard waved a hand dismissively. "We'll spin it as a mutual decision, stepping down to focus on family or some other nonsense. The point is, Pinnacle needs leadership that understands this business is about profit, not social experiments." "Richardson truly believes that diversity drives innovation," Richard said, his tone making it clear what he thought of the idea. "She's too idealistic for this industry. That's why she needs to go," Howard agreed. "A woman like that was never going to succeed in real estate long term. We gave it a shot. It made for good PR, but now it's time for serious leadership." Maya felt as if she'd been struck physically. A woman like that. The words echoed in her head as she backed away from the door, nearly bumping into a potted plant in her haste to distance herself from what she'd heard. She made it to the elevator, her legs moving automatically while her mind reeled. In the reflective doors, she caught a glimpse of herself, of Michelle, and for a second didn't recognize her own face. That night in her empty home, Maya removed her disguise piece by piece. The wig, the glasses, the makeup. With each item she set aside, her resolve hardened. Andre arrived at 9 as arranged. One look at her face told him everything. "It's bad," he said simply. Maya nodded, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "It's worse than we imagined. The corruption goes all the way to the C-suite. Richard is working with the regional directors to convince the board to remove me." "Richard?" Andre looked genuinely shocked. "But he's been with you since the beginning." "Apparently that was long enough," Maya replied bitterly. "They think I'm an experiment that failed. A diversity hire who couldn't handle real leadership." Andre swore under his breath. "What do you want to do?" Maya walked to her home office, where she'd spent the last 2 hours preparing documents, organizing evidence, making calls. On her desk lay a comprehensive plan, one that would shock everyone who thought they knew Maya Richard so. "I'm going to burn it all down," she said quietly, "and then I'm going to rebuild it from the ashes." "The company?" Andre asked, alarmed. Maya turned to him, her eyes clear and determined. "Not the company. The culture, the rot, everything that's corrupted what we built." She handed him a folder. "Tomorrow morning I need you to make sure these papers are filed with our attorneys. Then I need you to be in the main conference room at 9 sharp. Andre flipped through the documents, his eyes widening. "Maya, this will cause chaos." "Good," she said firmly. "Chaos is exactly what Pinnacle Properties needs right now." As Andre left, Maya stood at her window looking out at the Atlanta skyline, at the Pinnacle building standing tall among its neighbors. By this time tomorrow, nothing would be the same. For the first time since beginning her undercover journey, she felt not just anger or disappointment, but a strange sense of clarity. They thought she was too idealistic, too soft to lead. Tomorrow they would learn just how wrong they were. The main conference room at Pinnacle Properties headquarters could seat 50 people comfortably. By 8:45 a.m. it was standing room only. Word had spread rapidly through the company that CEO Maya Richardson had called an emergency all-hands meeting, with video links to the Denver and Chicago offices. The room buzzed with speculation. Many employees hadn't seen Maya in weeks as she'd reportedly been traveling. Some whispered about potential layoffs or a company sale. Others wondered if the rumors about board conflicts were true. At precisely 8:55, Richard Dawson, the CFO, entered with Howard Parker and several other regional directors. They took seats at the front, their expressions a mixture of confusion and annoyance. None of them had been briefed on the meeting's purpose. "What's this about?" Howard asked Richard in a stage whisper that carried across the room. Richard shrugged. "No idea. Her assistant just said attendance was mandatory." At the back of the room, Andre stood quietly, his tablet in hand, watching the executives with barely concealed contempt. Next to him was a woman few recognized, company counsel Patricia Wu, who rarely attended all staff meetings. The clock ticked to 9 a.m. All eyes turned expectantly to the door. It remained closed. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Richard checked his watch ostentatiously, making sure others noticed his impatience. As the minutes stretched on, the whispers grew louder. At 9:07, a side door opened. But instead of Maya Richardson in her usual power suit, in walked a plain-looking woman in unremarkable business-casual attire. She moved to the front of the room with hesitant steps, her eyes downcast behind tortoiseshell glasses. "Who's that?" someone whispered loudly. "New HR manager, maybe?" The woman reached the podium and set down a folder. She took a deep breath, visibly steeling herself, then looked up and surveyed the room. Her gaze lingered briefly on Richard and Howard, then swept across the assembled employees. "Good morning," she said, her voice soft and uncertain. "My name is Michelle Rivers." A few people nodded politely. Most looked confused or disappointed, expecting their CEO. "I joined Pinnacle Properties 2 weeks ago," Michelle continued. "I started in Denver, then transferred to Chicago, and finally came here to Atlanta." Richard stood up, his impatience boiling over. "Excuse me, but we're waiting for CEO Richardson." "Is she running late?" Michelle looked directly at him, and something in her expression made him pause. "No," she said. "She's exactly on time." With deliberate movements, Michelle removed her glasses. Then she reached up and pulled off the wig, revealing Maya's natural hair slicked back against her head. She wiped a hand across her cheek, removing some of the makeup that had subtly altered her features. A collective gasp rippled through the room. "For those who haven't figured it out yet," she said, her voice dropping its hesitant tone and taking on the commanding presence everyone associated with Maya Richardson, "I am your CEO, and for the past 2 weeks, I've been working undercover in our own company." The silence that followed was absolute. Richard had gone pale. Howard looked like he might be sick. "I went undercover because something felt wrong in the company I built," Maya continued, her voice gaining strength. Client complaints were rising. Employee turnover was increasing. Our culture seemed to be eroding. But I couldn't get straight answers from my executive team about what was happening. She opened the folder on the podium and removed a stack of photographs. So I decided to see for myself, and what I found was worse than I could have imagined. She held up the first photo, a screenshot of an email from Howard to his sales team explicitly, telling them to ignore fair housing regulations for certain neighborhoods. I found systematic discrimination. Another photo, a performance review where a female employee was criticized for being too aggressive while a male colleague was praised for identical behavior. I found deliberate undermining of company policies. Third photo, a memo from Richard to regional directors explaining how to reinterpret Maya's diversity initiatives to minimize their impact. I found employees afraid to speak up about harassment. A fourth photo, an HR document showing how discrimination complaints were being reclassified and buried. With each revelation, the room grew more tense. Some executives shifted uncomfortably. Others stared in disbelief. Many employees looked at their bosses with new understanding in their eyes. Maya set down the stack of photos and looked directly at Richard. And yesterday, I stood outside a conference room and heard my own CFO and the Chicago regional director planning to convince the board to remove me because, and I quote, "A woman like that was never going to succeed in real estate long term." Richard opened his mouth to speak, but Maya held up a hand, silencing him. "Don't bother denying it. I have recordings of everything." My disguise included fully functional recording devices. Every discriminatory comment, every unethical directive, every plot against me, all documented. Maya stepped away from the podium and walked slowly along the front of the room. 5 years ago, I founded Pinnacle Properties with a vision. We would be different from other real estate companies. We would value integrity over easy profits. We would build a diverse team because diversity brings strength and innovation. We would treat every client with respect, regardless of the size of their budget. She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. Somewhere along the way, that vision was corrupted. Not by most of you. Many of you still believe in what Pinnacle should be. I saw that during my time undercover. I saw employees uncomfortable with unethical practices but afraid to speak up. I saw people trying to do the right thing in a system that was increasingly designed to reward the wrong things. Maya turned to face the executives directly. The corruption starts at the top. With leaders who decided that profit margins were more important than people, Who decided that my values were just for show? Who actively worked to undermine everything I built while smiling to my face? She returned to the podium and pressed a button on her tablet. On the large screen behind her, a document appeared. This is being distributed to all employees as we speak. It details the changes effective immediately at Pinnacle Properties. The room collectively leaned forward to read the screen. First, the following people are terminated, effective immediately. The list included Richard Dawson, Howard Parker, Thomas Wilson, Brian Kelly, and 12 other executives and managers from across all 3 offices. Security personnel appeared at the doors, ready to escort the terminated employees from the building. Second, all current HR complaints will be reviewed by an independent third party, with appropriate action taken regardless of who is implicated. Maya clicked to the next slide. Third, a new organizational structure effective today. The chart showed a flattened hierarchy, with several names highlighted in green, mostly lower-level employees who had demonstrated integrity during Maya's undercover stint. Fourth, a comprehensive review of all client cases from the past year. Any client who was misled or mistreated will be contacted personally with appropriate remedies offered. Richard, finally finding his voice, stood up. "You can't do this. The board won't stand for it." Maya smiled for the first time since beginning her presentation. Actually, the board unanimously approved these actions this morning. She nodded to Andre, who tapped his tablet. The screen changed to show a video conference with all 7 board members, including Chen and Rodriguez. "After reviewing the evidence I collected," Maya explained, "and consulting with company counsel about the potential legal liabilities created by your actions, the board agreed that these steps are not just appropriate but necessary." As security began escorting the terminated executives out, Maya addressed the remaining employees directly. "Today is a new beginning for Pinnacle Properties. It won't be easy. We've lost nearly 20% of our leadership team. Our reputation may suffer in the short term when this becomes public. But we will rebuild on a foundation of genuine integrity, not just words in a company handbook." She looked around the room, making eye contact with as many people as possible. Some of you knew what was happening and stayed silent. Others tried to fight it and were shut down. Going forward, every employee at Pinnacle will be judged by their actions, their commitment to our values, and their willingness to speak up when something isn't right. The room remained silent, the magnitude of the morning's event still sinking in. "Those of you who remain have a choice to make," Maya continued. "You can be part of the new Pinnacle or you can leave. There is no middle ground anymore." She closed her folder and stepped away from the podium. "Department heads will receive detailed instructions within the hour. For now, please return to your work areas and reflect on what kind of company you want to be part of. My door is open to anyone who wants to talk." As Maya walked toward the exit, employees parted to let her through. Some looked shocked, others relieved, many uncertain, but no one could deny the power of what they'd just witnessed. In the hallway, Andre fell into step beside her. He searched for the right word. "Necessary," Maya finished for him. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. Maya paused, looking back at the conference room where people were slowly dispersing, talking in hushed, urgent tones. "Now we rebuild," she said. "The right way this time." 6 months later, Pinnacle Properties was featured in Business Week magazine. The headline read, "The CEO who fired her entire leadership team and saved her company." The article detailed how Maya Richardson's drastic actions, while initially shocking the industry, had transformed Pinnacle into a model of ethical business practices and inclusive leadership. Client satisfaction was at an all-time high. Employee turnover had plummeted. Profits had dipped initially, but were now climbing steadily as Pinnacle's reputation for integrity attracted a new class of clients and talented employees. Maya kept the magazine on her desk as a reminder, not of her triumph, but of how easily a vision could be corrupted when no one was watching. She would never make that mistake again. Pinnacle wasn't perfect, no company was. But now when problems arose, they were addressed openly. When mistakes were made, they were acknowledged and corrected. When unethical behavior was spotted, it was confronted immediately. The company Maya had always envisioned finally existed. All it took was the courage to see the truth and the determination to demand better.